is your favorite X-Men team, and how effective do you think they'd be if they were evil? Welcome back, Nerd Squad. It's me, Amanda. What makes an X-Men team evil? The leadership? The members? Let's find out together. Number 10. Dark X-Men. The Dark X-Men are basically what we get when Norman Osborn is put in charge of all the super teams that you can imagine. This all went down during the Dark Reign period over at Marvel Comics. Norman ended up becoming the world's greatest hero, at least in civilians and the government's eyes, after he successfully shot and killed Skrull Queen Veranke, in essence ending Secret Wars and, in a weird twist, kinda saving the day. Not something people usually expect with Norman Osborn. As a reward, he was given the task of creating a new organization to take over for the disbanded S.H.I.E.L.D. Norman created Hammer in response and made his own teams of both Dark Avengers and Dark X-Men. His initial roster included Dark Beast, Mystique, Mimic, and Omega. I feel like Dark Beast is such a great evil mutant that he generally just gets to be on like almost every evil mutant X-Men team. But also, I love Dark Beast, so I'm kinda fine with that. I wish he was still alive though, so that at least I had some way to rationally explain Hank's behavior lately, who I thought might have been Dark Beast this whole time, but considering that Dark Beast is dead and everything else that's been going on, this now seems extremely unlikely, sadly. Dark Beast, please come back to save Hank from himself. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not click that subscribe button? I know there's a bunch of you that aren't subscribed, so I'm talking to you. Click the subscribe, do it. Do it, I say! Number 9. Avengers vs. X-Men. Some might argue as to who is really evil in this storyline, if anyone is, but then there are those that actually might see it the Avengers way. After all, in Avengers vs. X-Men, there are really two sides to take, although thankfully in the end, the two teams do manage to put their differences aside to come together and resolve the issue of what to do exactly with the Phoenix Force. However, in this story, the X-Men initially are opposed to the Avengers as they want to welcome the Phoenix Force back to Earth, which is reportedly rapidly on the approach. It's believed that the Phoenix is kinda coming to merge with Hope Summers. While the X-Men are kinda wary of that, they do feel more open to the idea of the Phoenix's return, feeling that they could maybe use it for good, whereas the Avengers are pretty much vehemently opposed as a result of the Phoenix's history of destruction. The Avengers, and perhaps rightfully so, would rather see the cosmic entity completely destroyed. As the fight ensues, the Phoenix is split into 5 pieces, and some of the X-Men are even corrupted later by its power, becoming known as the Phoenix 5. Number 8. CEREBRO'S X-Men. Cerebro ended up at one point gaining sentience, and creating their own X-Men. The sentient Cerebro took the form of Professor Charles Xavier. Cerebro recruited their own X-Men to oppose the true X-Men team, or at least seemingly did. We'd later learn that this team, composed of Grey King, Rapture, Landslide, Crux, Mercury, and Zaos, were actually also imposters. In truth, being nothing more than nanotech lifeforms which Cerebro had built using personality templates that Cerebro had taken from within its own mutant database. Cerebro had wanted to oppose the real Xavier and the real X-Men, getting them out of the way so that it could successfully launch a satellite that would help it to locate and then catalog all mutants on the planet, freezing them in a cryogenic stasis in order to preserve their DNA. Yeah, cataloging mutants doesn't sound so bad until you realize that's what Cerebro wanted to do with them. After Cerebro's X-Men were defeated, Cerebro labeled them as failures before absorbing their digital bodies back within itself, becoming a giant monstrosity. Fortunately, Cerebro was defeated by the real deal in the end, Charles Xavier, and the real X-Men team. Number 7. Apocalypse's Horsemen. Apocalypse's Horsemen have featured many X-Men and many X-Men adjacent characters over the years. One of the more recent iterations of the team after Apocalypse was awakened following House of M and Decimation included Polaris as Pestilence, Gazer as War, Sunfire as Famine, and finally Gambit as Death. That's a good number of X-Men that he recruited that time around. Although Apocalypse and his Horsemen are generally opposed by the X-Men themselves, the fact remains that there have also been a good number of them recruited by Apocalypse himself. And in the Age of Apocalypse reality, more mutants have joined him than not. Even though he is still technically opposed by Magneto's X-Men there, many of the mutants we'd associate with the X-Men team in the main continuity end up actually joining Apocalypse instead in that reality. In fact, at one point, Wolverine even becomes the new Apocalypse in in the Age of Apocalypse reality. Pretty wild, I know. Number 6. 10 Evil XAVIERS. A few teams on this list aren't specifically made up of a copy 1-for-1 of evil X-Men, and this is one of those teams. It was simply too good for me to not include, so you're welcome. In the fantastic Extreme X-Men, this is a team of villains from alternate realities and even perhaps the main reality that our multiversal X-Men team led by Earth 616's Dazzler must face. The 10 Evil XAVIERS feature one that is a cowboy, another that is a Cthulhu-like floating brain, one that is a giant Akanti whale, and so many more amazing weird alternates of the X-Men's leader and mentor. Number 5. INHUMANS vs. X-Men. In INHUMANS vs. X-Men, the X-Men team kind of become the bad guys. This was all thanks to the machinations of Emma Frost, who manipulated the rest of the mutants by making Cyclops appear as her own martyr. She made it appear as though Cyclops was killed by the INHUMANS so that she could inspire the mutants to rise up against the INHUMANS and basically go to war against them. In reality, the INHUMANS did not actually want to fight the mutants and instead preferred to find a peaceful resolution initially. That was what they kind of wanted to do. They were like, we're sorry that we kind of accidentally killed some of your people, let's figure it out. But no. The conflict started when exposure to the Terrigen Mists ended up being deadly to the mutants, some of whom got very sick and then died, causing a case of Mpox. However, in the end, it was revealed that Emma was simply using her illusion powers to make people believe Cyclops was still alive after he'd already died almost instantly due to exposure to the Terrigen Mists. She then made people believe that Black Bolt had actually been the one to kill Cyclops, which was what got all the other mutants and X-Men riled up. Needless to say, after the truth came out and everything was mostly resolved, Emma went deep into hiding as a result of everyone being pretty pissed at her, which honestly, fair enough. Number 4. Revenants. Who are the Revenants? They're basically like, well, evil X-Men. Well, at least evil versions of a few of the X-Men. In an alternate reality where Cassandra Nova becomes ruler of the world, they may even have a ton more power over there. In fact, I believe they do. I think they rule that alternate world. Ugh. But the ones we're talking about here instead appear in Uncanny X-Force, where they face off against some of the former / current / future X-Men members. Revenants are also known by another name though, one you might be familiar with if you are a Cassandra Nova fan or a Shi'ar fan: Mumadrai. The Mumadrai are basically evil duplicates of oneself. According to Shi'ar beliefs, in order to be born, one must first defeat their evil alternate, their Mumadrai, in the womb. That was what Charles did in order to defeat Cassandra Nova, his seemingly evil twin, who really is a Mumadrai. However, despite being defeated because Charles was so powerful, in reflection, so was Cassandra, who would end up recovering and returning years after that initial defeat. In Uncanny X-Force issue number 10, we're introduced to a few more Mumadrai that are the dark reflection of Betsy Braddock's Psylocke, Storm, and Puck. While Puck has never been an X-Men and isn't a mutant, he is X-Men adjacent, having served on Alpha Flight and X-Force, hence his appearance in this series and the reason why I'm still gonna talk about him on this list, so haha! Number 3. Curse of the Mutants. Curse of the Mutants represents a time and team that were turned evil by really the curse of vampirism. Well, at least a few of the X-Men were. Primarily, Jubilee was the one captured and transformed into a vampire as a means to lure out Wolverine. This was all part of Zarus's, Dracula's son, evil plan to take over San Francisco and bring all vampires together under his control, of course. However, what Zarus was not anticipating was that Wolverine, who he successfully managed to lure out and transform, it seemed, had actually been caught and turned as part of Cyclops' master plan. Haha, he one-upped him with a plan that was part of his plan. In the end, the X-Men therefore managed to defeat Zarus, with Wolverine being reverted back to being human, or rather I suppose I should say mutant, and Jubilee being rescued, although for a time Jubilee would still remain a vampire. Number 2. Onslaught. I mean, if we want to get a little loose with the definition of a team, I would say a team is just more than one person, so I don't even think this is that loose, but then we could consider Onslaught to be an evil X-Men team. Technically, he was originally made up of a team of 2 people, Professor X and Magneto, both of whom have been known to lead the X-Men in the history of the comics. And while this psychic entity originally was only a combination of their 2 minds, when Onslaught returns appearing on Krakoa, it's actually because because Onslaught is linked to basically everyone who has died and then been resurrected on the island. Basically, Onslaught managed to live on in Charles' psyche and then use his small, like, kind of sliver of existence there to make his way into each upload following a mutant's resurrection, thereby getting out little pieces of Onslaught all over until they could come together and make one giant Onslaught. So in essence, Onslaught is also a part of everyone who has died and been brought back to life on the mutant island nation. This version of Onslaught as such poses an even greater threat to mutant kind and the world, especially as it creates and feeds off chaotic energy, infecting the mutants that it is a part of, but also feasting off of that chaotic energy as well. So ugh. Number 1. Future X-Men. The future X-Men weren't actually X-Men. That was the problem when it came to their evilness. That was all part of their evil plot. Although this mutant group advertised themselves as X-Men once they traveled back in time, in reality, we had later learned that they were indeed not X-Men at all, but instead were an evil future brotherhood. The team was initially formed by Charles Xavier II, the son of Charles and Mystique. He ended up recruiting the team to stand opposed to the X-Men, who Charles saw as a disappointment in regards to what his father had hoped for them. Charles II, that is, not the original Charles. While Charles II's team failed at defeating the X-Men multiple times, Reyes, Charles' half-brother, with Reyes' parents being Wolverine and Mystique, got the idea to travel back in time to when the X-Men would be more vulnerable in order to defeat them. That's all the time we have for this video. I hope you enjoyed this list, and if you want to hear more about evil mutants, let us know in the comments below. I love talking about evil mutants. Thank you for watching. Until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube. Bye!